days have passed since my coming to this dull seaside hotel in hopes of finding some rest, and 3 nights have gone by without sleep. I pass them in contemplation of things that I can avoid by day, dozing off around dawn for a few unsettled hours before the full sun wakes me. Exhausted, I anticipate sleeping well the following night out of sheer necessity, and still do not. I am not here of my own accord. My friend's concern was touching, if overbearing. They blamed overwork and too much responsibility for my state, and so George took over for a fortnight, insisting I avoid all matters of business. If I were inclined to sketch picturesque ruins or take seaside walks, this would be a very paradise, but without sleep and with little interest in architecture, such activities wither into insignificance. The boredom is only a small portion of my trouble. All the pillows in the world cannot induce my mind to sleep. I speak to hardly anyone, afraid of what madness might leave my mouth. If they knew the thoughts that go through my head in the darkness, they would think me mad. I cannot speak them even to my closest friends who hold my welfare so dear. What would they say had they heard my prayers to heaven and hell alike? By day I tell my shadow friend that it will pass. This friend appeared a few days after my arrival, and they are of a quiet nature, but they say they mean to help me. I listen, for I have no choice. I see them in glimpses here and there, a smoke-like figure, and hear them in the recesses of my mind. I should perhaps be concerned, but being alone and exhausted, it seems natural to invent a companion, and I do not doubt that the delusion will pass with my recovery. That I look forward to their disappearance I have not told Shadow Figure. It would not do to insult the only companion I have in this place. In the evenings I read, not the newspapers with their worrisome accounts of business failures, but books from the hotel's shelf. Traveller stories, novels, poetry. Travelling through the wilds of Sweden would suit me ill, but the author's account is congenial. Still, he is far too interested in ghosts and spirits, and Scandinavia seems rife with them. They speak of one called the Mare, from which we derive our nightmare, that steals sleep and paralyzes the sleepless. At least I can assure myself that such bogies would be sorely disappointed should they visit me. I began a letter to my cousin, but it was fruitless. George, I would give my soul for a good night's sleep. He would not understand. Better that he think I spend my days in quiet rest and my nights likewise. I told Shadow Figure instead, and in the answering silence I felt understanding. I lie in bed, sleepless. I lie. It is funny how the truth blurs at dawn, the invisible and the unsaid. The doctor told me that I must take a few weeks' rest before I suffered a nervous collapse. I hear Shadow Figure laugh sometimes when I mention this. I woke this morning with a new sensation, that of relief. I hardly know where to begin describing the occurrences of last night. As I have often done since arriving here, I spent the day in avoidance of other guests. In the evening I prepared myself for another sleepless night, pouring a cup of cocoa, but omitting the tincture of laudanum that had long since failed me. That night I looked absently out the window, watching the shadows grow around me, lengthening into one blur of merciful oblivion. I was the only thing in that room that could not melt into that darkness, the single suffocating light. As night fell, Shadow Figure arrived. Between one moment and the next, the shadows went from silent to animate. I saw a beckoning motion and turned, but of course there was nothing there, only the suggestion in my mind that I put out my hands. My friend had brought a handful of light, the rose colour of sunrise, and poured it into my cupped palms. It was sweet, rather cold on my tongue. I knew at once that I had taken a draught of sleep. Almost at once I felt my thoughts slipping away as my head sank onto the pillow. Can I describe the refreshment of a night's sleep after having been denied it for so long? I woke a decade younger, my eyes bright and my hair untouched by grey. The hotel manager, the other guests, all could see my new brightness. I told myself I had made their days more brilliant with the radiance of my spirits. Even in the dour, grim atmosphere of this town, they seemed to respond to my happiness. And this is a dour sort of place. Had I spent one more sleepless night, I might have begun to believe in half the things I have read about. I thank my stars that last night, at least, it was not the sleep-stealing Mara that found me, but the opposite. Soft rain was falling when I went to bed last night, and though it ought to have been the most soothing of sounds, I felt myself growing more wakeful by the moment. Groaning, I turned to wrap the pillow around my head, when something in the corner of my eye moved. I leapt up. The suggestion came into my head that I should put my hands out. This time, sleep was a soft violet blue. The taste was like that of heavy sea air, which made me think of lying awake at midnight. It was a strange combination of flavours, but I had no time to contemplate it before my eyes closed. And so it went on for days. I would taste the sleep of shaded midday rooms, hearthsides at late evening, ships at dawn. I did not dream, and though after some days I woke almost restored, I had instructions not to return until a full 2 weeks had passed. Now that I could take some pleasure in my time here, I was inclined to let George run things for a few more days yet. At length there came a night when, curious beyond sense, I decided to follow Shadow Figure's flickering motions, to see where sleep could be found. A question to baffle the scientists indeed, and if I had tried it just one night earlier, but now I could barely see the shape at the edge of my vision, the creature that had saved me. Despite my certainty that their disappearance meant my recovery, I mourned. That night, waiting for the arrival of Shadow Figure, I told myself sternly that I could sleep without aid, that my mind was my own again. After sinking into a sleep more restless than before, I found myself walking, not sleepwalking, but wandering, driven by a will other than my own sense, towards the door leading to another guest's room. The suggestion came into my mind, a familiar not voice by now, that I should enter. In something like a trance, I could not wonder that the door presented no obstacle. Though I briefly wondered if I had become a phantom, I could feel the beating of my heart beneath the nightshirt. In the bed lay a sleeping figure who did not move as I entered, and my feet seemed to make no sound on the floor. No intentions were present in my mind, malicious or benevolent, only the pressing need to approach the bed, and the knowledge that here lay the answer. The flicker of a shadow that should not be there told me that I was not alone. Emboldened, I stepped closer. The figure in the bed was snoring gently, eyes tight shut. I had spoken to this guest, today at reception, a solid brick of a man. His sleep would do perfectly. As Shadow Figure vanished from the corner of my eye, I climbed onto the bed, placed my hands around the man's throat, felt his chest sink under my weight. I saw his eyes open, his focus sharpen as he saw me in the darkness. I heard his breath catch as he understood his helplessness. He did not and could not scream. I pressed harder, just enough to take what I needed, a pool of blue-black sleep, the very colour of the night sky outside, which I caught in my shaking hands and lapped up where I was. As I fled his room, I knew what he had seen, the shapeless, malevolent form crouched atop his sleeping body, the hands round his throat. I had stolen his sleep. I had become the nightmare.